tell them check out the blog, bro. YouTube channel called MKO. It's Pugilism Boxing Algorithm. M stand for Marvin and Kevin's initials KO. Yeah. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is MKO Pugilism, talking all things boxing. And right about now, I just want to wish everybody the best at this time. Hope and pray that yourself, your families are all well during this time where we're all going through this coronavirus thing. So I just hope each and every one that's watching this right now is well, and that your families are doing well, you know. And right now, just gonna speak on the Glovegate conspiracy, which is something that is still ongoing. It's kind of an old one. It's about Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury, specifically regarding a lot of these videos that are being made and being put out there regarding the idea that Tyson Fury's glove had been doctored in some way, had been manipulated in some way to give him an advantage, to allow him to cheat in the fights. And I'm just going to give my reasoning today as to why I believe Tyson Fury did not in fact cheat in either fight, and why I don't think the gloves were doctored at all. So just bear with me, just going to go through a few points here now. And so first of all, regarding these championship fights and majority of these big fights in America, England, wherever you want to speak of, when it comes to the wrapping of the hands, the wrapping of the hands of each fighter is witnessed by a member of the opponent's team. It's witnessed by somebody from the boxing commission in whatever state that you're boxing in. There's always a member of the commission who's in the dressing room while you're being bandaged up, gloved up and that. And there's normally CCTV cameras, TV cameras in there, so the entire wrapping of the hands and the gloving up process, even you getting gloved up, is actually watched on camera. And you know, the hand wrapping and that is watched by the other member of the other team, member of the commission. So this is not an event where you're left to your own devices. The whole process is seen. If the team of the other fighter, the opponent, was not happy with anything, they could point it out right there and then. Naseem Richardson done it when Shane Mosley fought Antonio Margarito. He saw something in the bandages that wasn't quite right, and they had to take that off. It turned out to be plaster of Paris, something illegal. They had to take it out. They had to rewrap his hands, and in the fight he got knocked out. So you can point out anything that you see that's a discrepancy, that's an inconsistency, anything that doesn't look right in the changing room. You've got the opportunity to be in the other guy's changing room and to point out any wrongdoing. And it's all on camera. Whatever is done in those changing rooms is recorded, is on camera, is televised. A lot of it is. And the gloves that you fight in are agreed and chosen by the teams beforehand. I don't know, it might be about a week before or something like that. And what happens is you get to choose, I believe, one pair of gloves, and then you get to choose also like a secondary pair, backup pair. So you get that, you choose them, and then those gloves that you choose, they're taken away, and then you don't see those gloves again until the fight night, until you're in your changing room and you're ready to go, ready to get gloved up. That's when you get your gloves, you get them on the fight night. So you haven't got a time where you're sort of alone with the gloves, or you get any opportunity to do anything. You know, both fighters, their gloves go away, and then you get them on the fight night. So you can't manipulate them, you can't do anything to them because you don't have them. You don't have them in the first place. They go away, come back on fight night. You know, the wraps and the gloves, also another thing is that they get signed off by the commission. So as you're there on the fight night, they sign your wraps, they sign your gloves, and the commission has to certify that, right, we as a boxing commission, we're happy for you to wear these wraps, we're happy that these bandages are up to scratch, we're happy that these gloves are fine, and you're ready to fight. So they've all got to sign off on it, and it's all, again, this sort of stuff you see it when you watch professional boxing, signatures on gloves, hand wraps, and again you see a lot of this stuff, this process of signing off the gloves and bandages. You see this on camera as well. And Fury wore these MX Everlast gloves, which are filled with horsehair, which is a bit of a different type of filling than a lot of gloves, which are foam, which are a bit firmer and a bit more solid. The Everlast MX gloves, they're horsehair, which is a bit more soft, a bit flappier. It's like it's a filling that they used to use a lot in old school boxing, decades gone by, 60s, 70s, going back further than that, where they had the sort of thumb detached. And this is a filling that you more saw in those eras, although there are some today, the MX and that use horsehair, and some fighters use them and some fighters don't. A lot of fighters don't use them. It depends on what you feel comfortable in boxing, but they're an approved glove, but they're actually, the way they behave once you've been fighting in them, once you've been sweating in them, is going to be totally different to a sort of foam glove. A foam glove, which is what a lot of other ones are, they sort of hold together. They're a lot firmer, and they sort of hold their shape a lot more, even after you've been sweating in them. But horsehair gloves, they tend to be a bit floppier and a bit more, you get a bit more sort of wriggle room in them because of the different type of filling. Definitely different to what Wilder was wearing. Wilder's one's a bit more stiff because it's padded with foam. And there's a lot of people been pointing to Fury doing this, the flicking of the wrist, and saying that this gave him some sort of advantage. And he was doing this even in the lead up to the fight. You look at the training videos, the media workouts that happened before the first fight, and you'll see Tyson Fury sort of flicking his wrist a bit, and that was just his thing. That was what he was doing, leading up to the fight, and he done a bit of that in the fight. These gloves, the MXs, they've been used by fighters in the past, such as Marcos Maidana, fighters in the present, such as Canelo Alvarez. You've got loads of videos on YouTube, if you look for them, of guys slowing even Canelo right down, and it looks the same thing, like his wrist is sort of bending a little bit or bending forward, and when he's building up to throw a hook, like in the Amir Khan fight, there's a few of his fights where you see the same sort of floppiness. And again, it's not because of a doctored glove, it's just simply because it's got that horsehair filling, and it just reacts differently than foam does, and the flicking of the wrist thing that Fury was doing with Wilder, again, it's something that it's an old trick. You see the old guys, you see Ali and other slick boxers doing it, and it's more of a distraction than anything. It doesn't really give you an advantage, because ultimately there's no sort of power in it. And that's the thing I disagree with regarding this advantage that Fury allegedly had. If he's flicking his wrist, if he's sort of slapping instead of punching Wilder, if that's what he's doing, yeah, it could sort of cause a bit of a distraction. It could sort of throw your concentration off a little bit. It could annoy your opponent a little bit, but ultimately, if you're not punching properly, your fist's not in the proper part of the glove, you're not punching with the knuckles, then ultimately you're not going to hurt anyone. You're not going to do any damage. I'm sure any boxers out there who fought or fight currently, you'll know that if you're fighting somebody who doesn't punch correctly, who's trying to flick you or whatever, what you do with that is you just walk straight through it. If you're flicking at me or whatever, I'll just walk straight through your little flicks, and I'll land my big shots. I'll land my proper shots. And this flicking is kind of nonsensical, really. I mean, yeah, it can distract a guy. It might throw him off a bit, but ultimately there's no power in it. There's nothing in it to really do any damage. You know, there's nothing there in a flick or a slap. It can't do any damage. What does damage in a boxing ring is a punch, where you punch properly with your knuckles. And there's a lot of people coming up with stuff about, I've heard about Fury's fist was in the wrist part of the glove, it wasn't in the knuckle, and that gave him an advantage. And again, that's another ridiculous theory, because at the end of the day, if your knuckles in the wrist part of the glove, you've got no advantage. You know, there's no advantage in that. There's no power in that. And ultimately, if you do that, if your fist is in the wrist part, then ultimately the glove would probably come off your hand. And if not that, you'd probably break your hand, or at least break all your fingers. You know, that's a ridiculous idea. I mean, it ultimately gains you no advantage, because you're fighting a man who's got his fist in the proper part of the glove, and he can hurt you because he can hit you properly, and you're saying it's in the wrist. You know, what damage can you do from the wrist? You can't do any damage. All you can do if your fist is in the wrist is you can just hurt yourself and hurt your own hands. You know, that's why I think it's a nonsensical idea, and it certainly doesn't give you any advantage. You know, and boxing people should know this. People that box, or people that even put their hands in a pair of gloves, should know, look, your hands in the wrist part is just going to fall off, or you're going to hurt yourself. You hurt your own self. You certainly ain't going to do any damage to another fighter. You know, and also there's a big sort of refutation of this on a YouTube channel that done a very good job called Phoenix Compilations video, where they, you know, Phoenix Compilations, he really slowed Tyson Fury down. And you can see in that video from the first fight that Tyson Fury was clenching his fist in the fight. You can see that he's able to clench his fist and sort of pull up his shorts, and he's able to do certain things that if his fist was in the wrist part of the glove, he'd be able to do none of these things. And you can see he's this guy in the Phoenix Compilations video, they've really slowed it right down. That's a good one to check out if you do have any doubts about this situation. And you know, they suppose you know, people trying to say flicking is an advice. You know, you saw in these videos, you see clearly that, you know, he's got his fist properly in the glove. And, you know, the flicking, the slapping and all that stuff, I believe it's solely down to the type of gloves he was wearing. And, you know, one sort of final point on this is that it's very interesting how people have waited until Fury knocks out Wilder in the second fight to bring up videos about the first fight, which was scored a draw. You know, it's very interesting that people have waited all this time. They weren't saying anything after the first fight, which was scored a draw, which was a much closer fight than the second one. You know, after that first fight, and that's where most of the footage is coming from. That's where most of this Glovegate controversy and most of this footage of the floppy glove comes from, is the first fight. Because the second fight, he was wearing a completely different pair of gloves, different type of filling. I guess there would be foam filling, you know. And the first fight, no one, as far as I know, no one was bringing up anything about Fury cheated, Fury done this, Fury's gloves were doctored. They've waited all the way until now, when he's come and he's knocked out Wilder with a different pair of gloves, different pair entirely, and now they've come out the woodworks to accuse him. I just find that very strange and very odd. But anyway, nonetheless, I think it's just one of those things, really. You know, obviously I know everyone's got their favorite fighters and fighters they support, fighters they love. You know, I'm like that too, you know, but I really just try to be objective, and I think that's what people should start being. Just be objective. Look, at the end of the day, the first fight was a draw, Fury and Wilder. Second fight, you know, there's no question about who won the second fight. Fury won. Fury knocked Wilder out. And, you know, as fans and as a boxer, Wilder himself, he's got to deal with it. He's got to get over it. And I think the fans also, you know, We got to get over it. At the end of the day, it was a clear win, a knockout. There's no doubt about it. So, you know, at the end of the day, instead of coming up with conspiracies, you know, give the man who won his credit. You know, that's all I'm saying. I don't believe he cheated. I think it's pretty clear he didn't cheat. So, anyway, nonetheless, see you on the next vid. MKO Pugilism over and out.